Welcome to Too Close to Home, the series where we dig up creepy stories, haunted places and mysteries from our very own Patreons' hometowns. This episode we're looking at Jessica, Anthony, Stone, Peter and Krystal. And do we have some good stories in store for you five? If you want us to dig up stories from your area, head on over to Patreon and join our Too Close to Home tier. Not only will you get access to all of our documentaries there, including our most recent Minds of Madness on Chris Benoit, you'll also be in for a chance of being featured in Too Close to Home. Thank you everyone for supporting us, and now, let's hit those lights, sit back, and get started. Pike County, Kentucky was named after General Zebulon Pike, the explorer who discovered Pike's Peak. The area is renowned for the feud that raged between the Hatfield and McCoy families, that eventually ended in several murders, and today tourists visit the area to examine the graves and the relics of the feud. However, we are going to look at a less well-known case of murder for our Patreon Jessica, along with some haunting stories from the area. Let's start with the Lily Lid murders. On April 6, 1997, Jason Bryant, Natasha Cornett, Dean Mullins, Joseph Reisner, Krystal Sturgill, and Karen Howell from Pikeville, Kentucky, left their hometown to travel to New Orleans. Their ages ranged between 14 and 20. After just a few miles, they realized the car they were traveling in wasn't going to make it, so they hatched a plan to steal the car from a parking lot. The friends, who were armed with the two guns, stopped at a picnic spot along Interstate 81 outside Baileyton in rural Greene County, Tennessee, where they got into a conversation with the Lilylid family, who were returning from a religious convention. Vida Lilylid, who was carrying his 2-year-old son Peter, had approached Natasha and Karen to discuss his religious views. Soon after, Reisner and Bryant joined the conversation, and things escalated when Reisner pulled out a gun and said, "I hate to do you this way, but we are going to have to take you with us in your van." Vida pleaded with the group to let them stay at the rest stop, but they refused and forced him, his wife Delphina, son Peter and daughter Tabitha into their van, and at gunpoint ordered Vida to drive. Dean Mullins and Krystal Sturgill followed in the other car. Reisner directed the Lilylids, first to the interstate and then to a secluded road at the next exit near Greenville. The Lilylids were then lined up against a ditch along the road, where they were shot multiple times. Only little Peter survived the shooting. 2 days after the terrible murders, the gang were arrested. All 6 of the perpetrators were from Pike County, Kentucky, and were known to have had troubled backgrounds, and with the exception of Bryant, had attended Betsy Lane High School. During the trial, there were rumors that all 6 were involved with occultism and Satanism. It was very likely that Jason Bryant was the shooter, but all 6 were convicted of murder, although after a plea bargain, they were spared the death penalty and were sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole. To this day, all 6 remain in prison. As for Peter, well, he went on to live with his aunt in Sweden, where he still lives today, and continues to struggle with the injuries he sustained in the attack. Next, we will look at a couple more light-hearted ghostly tales from Pike County. And Jessica, we'd love to know if you have ever encountered any of these. Let's start with the Ramada Inn. The Ramada Inn in Paintsville is an unlikely looking place to have a ghost. It is fairly modern, and there's nothing creepy about its appearance. However, guests have said that staying there have left them feeling pretty creeped out and unrested after being kept awake by an unseen woman who walks up and down the hallways in high heels, waking guests from their sleep and causing them to get up from their beds and investigate, only to find no one there. Others have complained about unexplained voices and levitating objects in their rooms, and if you're lucky enough to stay in room 216, you are likely to be disturbed by a woman laughing loudly, who can still be heard when the room is unoccupied. Lastly, let's take a look at the Tan Man of Pike County. The Tan Man has been described as an ordinary, nondescript looking gentleman dressed in a khaki or tan shirt and pants. No one knows who he is, but those who have seen him say that as soon as you approach him, he disappears in front of your eyes, leaving just the smell of sweet roses behind. In fact, anything strange that happens in Pike County is usually attributed to the mysterious Tan Man. It seems he is to blame for a variety of paranormal phenomena, including musical instruments playing by themselves, the feeling of being followed or touched by invisible hands, objects moving by themselves, lights turning on and off, as well as pets being scared by an unseen force. However, in all instances, it seems the overriding sign that the tan man is around is the overwhelming smell of roses. Harrison Township in Michigan, USA is a beautiful place and a popular area for tourists. Due to its proximity to the shores of Lake St. Clair with its natural trails, playgrounds, beaches and boat docks, and our patron, Anthony Onufrak, is lucky enough to live there. For you, Anthony, we are first going to look at the sad case of Sean Raymond. In 1992, a human skull was found in material dredged out of the Clinton River in Harrison Township. For 12 years, the skull remained in the custody of the Michigan State Police, until in 2004, the skull was given to forensic artist and Michigan State Police Detective Sergeant Sarah Krebs for her to reconstruct. After it was completed, a former work colleague of Sean, who is now a police officer, recognized it, and dental records confirmed it was Sean Raymond, who had been missing for several years. 19-year-old Sean disappeared on July 21, 1983. He had finished his shift at a restaurant in Algonac and planned to go to a bar in Detroit with friends. But when he failed to come home the next day, his family reported him missing. Sean was a gay man, and although that should have no bearing on the case, back in the 1980s, it was more taboo, and his family felt because of that, a lot of his friends kept silent about what they knew. And some even hired lawyers to keep their names out of the investigation. This hindered the case, and initially no sign of Sean or his car were ever found. But after 21 years of hoping Sean would be found, the family finally got the news that Sean was dead. And worse, that his skull had been sitting in an evidence room for 12 years. However, they still do not know the circumstances of his death, and they are understandably angry about the 12-year delay in telling them the devastating news. Both Sean's family and the police believe the people of the community of Harrison Township know the answers to this case, and it's still an open investigation. Anyone with any information about what happened to Sean Raymond is asked to call the Michigan State Police. Now, we will have to travel just a little way to nearby Detroit to find any ghosts for you, Anthony, but it's absolutely teeming with them. Here we will look at a couple of the lesser known ones, such as the Alhambra Apartments, located on Temple Street in Detroit. This historic block of apartments was built in the early 1900s and has a murderous past. Rose Barron, a cook at the Alhambra, had been demoted to scrubwoman, and in retaliation she started poisoning the residents by adding arsenic to biscuits she handed out. After residents started being violently sick, Rose was arrested, as she was already under suspicion for killing members of her own family to claim insurance money. After a 19-week trial on May 15, 1905, the jury found Rose not guilty, as the people who were poisoned all recovered, unlike her family members, although it's always been believed Rose killed other residents in the apartment, and today the building is said to be haunted, either by a dead former resident, or Rose herself, who remained bitter over her demotion for the rest of her life. It is said that if you walk past the apartments at night, you can see eerie lights inside and a white apparition in the halls of the now abandoned apartment block. The planned redevelopment of the old site has recently stalled, and we wonder if Rose has anything to do with that. Moving on to the Detroit Art Center Music School, it's well known that the legendary escape artist Harry Houdini's final performance was at the Garrick Theatre in Detroit. It's reported that during that performance he was already gravely ill and passed out during the show, having to be revived before continuing, and soon after he was hospitalized at Detroit's Grace Hospital, where on October 31st, 1926, at the age of 52, he died. After his death, his body was taken to W.H. Hamilton & Co. Funeral Home, where his corpse was temporarily laid out in a coffin that had been commissioned as a prop for one of his stage shows, before he was taken to New York to be buried. In 1989, the building that once housed the W.R. Hamilton Funeral Home was sold to Detroit's Art Center Music School, and it's said that the spirit of Houdini remains in the building, and many believe it's no coincidence that Houdini died on Halloween. One of the most credible sightings of him was witnessed by an elderly receptionist who worked at the school, named Juanita. She claimed that one evening she was alone, finishing some work, when she felt a cold rush of air, and when she looked up, she saw Harry Houdini standing in the doorway to her office. She later claimed that every year on the anniversary of his death, Houdini would appear without fail in the same spot. Juanita, who lived until she was 102, told the story of her encounters with Houdini for the rest of her life. although many believe Houdini's spirit lingers in Detroit. No other sightings have been seen so clearly since. Sterling is a small area in Loudoun County, Virginia, and is the hometown of Stone Gasman. Stone has suggested we look slightly outside of Sterling at Leesburg, so that is where we started our search, and one of the first cases we found was the tragic and unusual murder of an eminent scientist. Robert Swartz was a renowned scientist in the field of biometrics and DNA research who lived in a farmhouse in Leesburg. He was the father of 3 children, Catherine, Jessie, and Clara Jane, and it was his 20-year-old daughter Clara Jane who was responsible for his bizarre murder. Clara, who was a sophomore at James Madison University at the time of the murder, had grown to increasingly dislike her father, to the point she spoke to friends about killing him. And at first she tried to research herbal poisons in order to make his death appear natural. She was also concerned he would cut her out of his will, as she was due to inherit a large sum of money. After failing to convince a previous boyfriend to kill Robert, she later met 18-year-old Kyle Hurlbut at Virginia Renaissance Festival in 2001. Kyle was already a troubled young man with a profound mental illness, and he soon fell under the spell of Clara through their shared interest of witchcraft, the occult, and fantasy games. Clara, who called herself the Priestess of High Chaos, convinced Kyle that her father was trying to kill her, and that he frequently physically abused her by punching her and pulling her hair. When Kyle heard this, he did not hesitate in coming to her rescue by agreeing to kill him. On December 8, 2001, Hulbert and 2 friends, 28-year-old Michael and 19-year-old Catherine, drove to Robert's farmhouse. Hulbert entered the house alone and attacked the scientist with a 27-inch sword. Hulbert slashed at the defenseless man, stabbing him 40 to 45 times before leaving him to die. Robert's body wasn't discovered for 2 days, but almost as soon as he was, the 3 perpetrators were arrested. And that is when the plot unraveled, and Clara was implicated in the crime, although it was a couple of months before she was arrested. At her trial, the prosecutors portrayed Clara as a manipulative young woman, who used the role-playing game Underworld to convince her friends to kill her father. On October 16, 2002, the jury convicted Clara of first-degree murder, and she was sentenced to serve 48 years in prison. She is currently housed at the Fluvanna Correctional Center for Women near Troy, Virginia. She has made many unsuccessful attempts to appeal her conviction. For their roles in the murder, Hulbert was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Michael was sentenced to 18 years, and Catherine served a 1-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder. Apart from the grisly murder, we also found a couple of reputed haunted places near to Stone's hometown. First we'll look at Ball Bluffs Battlefield Regional Park, said to be one of the most haunted places in the state. The park is where the Civil War Battle of Ball's Bluff was fought. The battle, which took place on October 21, 1861, was a disaster from start to finish for the Union Army. More than 900 Union troops were killed, wounded or taken prisoner, and 54 of the dead are buried in 25 graves in the small cemetery in Ball's Bluff. Sadly, 53 of them are unknown, with only James Allen of the 15th Massachusetts Infantry being identified. Over the years, lots of strange stories about the restless dead have been told, with reports of blood-curdling unexplained screams being heard, as well as a tree that shakes violently for no apparent reason near the site of a soldier's grave. Additionally, phantom footsteps, inexplicable sounds, and sightings of shadowy figures in uniforms have also been reported. The park is full of history and is said to be particularly eerie, especially at night. We'd love to know if you've ever been there, Stone, and had any creepy experiences there. Next up is the Oaklands Plantation, a former 3,500-acre wheat and wool producer that sadly, in the past, relied on slave labor for its success. Nowadays the historic site has been reduced to 260 acres, with a manor house that is judged to be one of the finest federal period houses in the nation, and is now owned by the National Trust, and it's the house that is reported to be teeming with paranormal activity. There are reports of footsteps by unknown persons, as well as voices and the alarms being set off for no reason. It seems it's the staff that bear the brunt of the paranormal incidents. In certain parts of the mansion, the temperature is known to drop dramatically, and doors inexplicably lock themselves. Sometimes staff look at family portraits on the walls, and the images blur before their eyes. In the servants' quarters on the 3rd floor, running water can often be heard, and apparitions have been seen there as well. Ghost hunters who are attracted to the house because of its reputation have recorded clear, unexplained human voices during their investigations, along with the strong smell of roses, a common occurrence throughout the building. It's believed to be so haunted that it now runs paranormal tours for visitors to experience the activity for themselves. Stone, we'd love to know if you've ever been to the house and experienced anything strange. Canberra is a magnificent city located in southeast Australia and is the country's capital. It's surrounded by mountain ranges and nature reserves and is full of history, so it's no surprise that many of the popular visitor attractions have resident ghosts. Peter de Berarais, whose hometown is Canberra, has sent us a personal story along with a few suggestions of places to look at, and we are not disappointed. We'll start with the story Peter sent us about a nurse who works on Canberra Hospital's paediatric ward. The ward is fairly new, having only been opened about 5 years ago, but since its opening, many of the nurses who work there have experienced strange things. Some of the nurses who work the night shift use empty wards to take their breaks, or have a sleep, and on more than one occasion they have heard footsteps of a toddler running up and down the ward hallway. They have also seen the privacy curtains that pull around the beds open by themselves. Shadow people have also been seen, as well as flickering lights in empty rooms and call bells going on and off by themselves. In fact, the lights flickering got so bad that electricians were called in but could find no faults. Now, apart from the unfortunate deaths that inevitably occur at any hospital, we couldn't find any history that could explain the activity. The only unavoidable tragedy we could find happened at the hospital that preceded Canberra Hospital, known as the Royal Canberra Hospital, located on Acton Peninsula. It closed when services were transferred to the newer Canberra Hospital, and the building was demolished by implosion on the 13th of July 1997, killing a 12-year-old girl named Katie Bender, who was hit by flying debris. Next up we have the Air Disaster Memorial. This is the site of a tragic aircraft accident in 1940, when a plane went down in Fairbairn Pine Plantation, killing all 10 people on board. At the site is a commemorative plaque to remember those who lost their lives. Those who have visited the area say there is something very unsettling about the place, and many have experienced paranormal phenomena. It's said that if you drive near the site, your car is likely to stall and not start up again. There have also been disturbing reports of sightings of a burning airman, a figure that appears in a fire flash before your eyes. Of course, all of this could be stirred up in the minds of the visitors, as by all accounts the location is very eerie. We'd be interested to know if you visited the site, Peter, and felt anything strange. Next up we have Blundell's Cottage, another place in Canberra said to be haunted, which is located next to Lake Burley Griffin. The cottage was built in 1860 and was initially home to the Ginn family, before passing on to George Blundell and his family, who lived there until 1933. The cottage is believed to be haunted by the ghost of Blundell's eldest child named Flora, who one day got too close to the fireplace and caught on fire. Those who have visited the house swear they can smell burning, and some report hearing a child scream in pain. Next up is Hotel Kurrajong, a place that has a truly haunting history. The luxury hotel is located in Barton, and it's said that Australia's 16th president, Ben Chifley, lived in a room at the hotel for 11 years, before suffering a heart attack and passing away in the room. Today the hotel rents Ben Chifley's former room out to visitors, so they can experience how he lived, and many of them get more than they bargained for, as it seems Ben often joins them in spirit form, as he's been seen walking around in his grey suit, looking out of the window, or sitting on the balcony. Lastly, we have the National Film and Sound Archive. The National Film and Sound Archive building in Canberra once served as the Institute of Anatomy and housed human skeletons, animal specimens, and other artifacts. The building is thought to be not only one of the most haunted in Canberra, but also one of the most haunted in Australia. Its reputation stems back to the 1920s, when Walter Burley Griffin designed the building and envisioned it being a National Museum of Zoology. Sir Colin Mackenzie was tasked with bringing this vision to life, and he filled the building and grounds with a strange collection of animal and human skeletons, as well as live animals. However, when the money ran out to keep up the collection, the museum rented part of it out to the Institute of Anatomy and was open to the public. Over the years, the bizarre collection included Phar Lap, the racehorse's heart, Ned Kelly's skull, and a mummy from Papua New Guinea. Eventually, the collection was moved to the National Museum of Australia, and the building was left empty for a few years. But in 1985, the National Film and Sound Archive moved into the building, and rooms where skeletons used to be displayed now show film memorabilia. In the foyer, there are 9 busts of famous Australians, including 2 death masks, and stored in a wall are the ashes of none other than Sir Colin Mackenzie, and it's Mackenzie who is believed to haunt the building. A number of sightings of him have been reported, and some say he has been seen coming out of the wall where his ashes are. Reportedly he appears, looks around, and then sucks back into the wall. But he is not the only apparition seen in the building. The ghost of a little girl has also been known to pop out of the grating in the old theaterette area. And in the old dissection labs, that are now offices, all sorts of strange things happen, including odd noises, objects flying around the room, and equipment malfunctions. Ghost hunting organisations who have visited the site have reported similar problems with their equipment, which they say confirms the presence of spirits, as they are known to suck the energy out of batteries. The next place we are looking at is Eagle River in Anchorage, Alaska. Now, most people think of Alaska as all glaciers, mountains and wildlife, but as Krystal, our Patreon, has found out, there is plenty of paranormal activity in the area as well. And first, we will share a personal story from Krystal about her creepy experiences. Krystal's story started shortly after she was born. For several years, whenever her parents took pictures of her, orbs and other strange anomalies appeared in the photos, even though they were not visible at the time. This kept happening until Krystal was about 5 years old, when the anomalies seemed to lessen. However, the strangeness did not stop there. It started manifesting in other ways. Fruit rolling out of deep fruit bowls, and taps turning on by themselves. Over the next few years, other strange things happened, such as TV channels changing by themselves, and VHS tapes rewinding by themselves. These things continued until Krystal moved out of the house aged 12 when her parents divorced. However, when Krystal was 15, she returned to the house to stay with her dad for Christmas, and on Boxing Day she went to bed around 11 PM, only to be awoken by what sounded like someone pounding on the door. Terrified, Krystal woke up her dad, and he told her to go and check it out. So she went downstairs and looked through the peephole on the front door, but there was no one there. Krystal went back to bed, but the knocking continued for over 30 minutes, abruptly stopping when she blew out a candle that was still lit in the bathroom. A few months after the unsettling incident, Krystal and her mum moved out of state, and during that time nothing strange happened. But when she moved back in with her dad when she was 19, the activity started again, with a strange feeling that someone was watching her in the house. Krystal's dad also confessed he was getting the same feeling, and they noticed their cats were acting strangely around a certain spot in the house. A few years later, Krystal was again staying with her father at Christmas. By this time, one of her cats had passed away, and this particular cat had a very distinct meow. While one evening, both Krystal and her dad heard the distinct meowing of the dead cat coming from upstairs. But when they went up to check it out, there was no cat there. If that wasn't creepy enough, we have found a couple of locations near Krystal's hometown that are reputed to be haunted, including Birchwood Saloon. Birchwood Saloon is about 7 miles from Eagle River. It's a family-friendly bar and restaurant with a reputation for being haunted by either a poltergeist or the ghost of a man called Jack. Jack is not a malevolent spirit, he's more of a prankster, and is known for knocking around pool balls and messing about with the lights. It's believed that Jack was the son of a previous owner of the bar who was tragically electrocuted whilst trying to fix an antenna on the roof of the building. Staff and visitors to the bar report seeing an unfamiliar figure dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt flash before them, walking through the bar, and there have also been reports of footsteps coming from the roof. Others have reported that Jack likes to move objects around and mess about with people's drinks. Whatever the truth about Jack, he seems to be a big draw for the bar, and paranormal enthusiasts travel there to try and catch a glimpse of him. Next up, we have the Wendy Williamson Auditorium at the University of Alaska, another place reputed to be haunted by several spirits. Visitors and staff have reported seeing a lady dressed in white who often appears on stage, even though she is not part of the show. Another ghost said to haunt the area is that of a teenage boy who messes with the lighting booth, as well as a more malevolent male ghost who appears to have a dislike of women with brunette hair. It is said He pushes their backs and has even been known to push women down the stairs. However, perhaps the most well-known ghost is that of John Wendell Williamson, or Wendy as he is affectionately known, who haunts the auditorium that he was named after, and has been seen still playing the piano in the lobby long after his death in 1988. John was a former music teacher at the university, and it seems he cannot stay away. Lastly, we have the St. Nicholas Orthodox Church in Eklunta for you, Krystal. Another curious place just out of Anchorage is the graveyard outside of the St. Nicholas Orthodox Church. It's filled with more than 100 colourful spirit houses, built to cover burial sites. The miniature buildings combine Russian Orthodox tradition and Native American practices. About 800 years ago, the area was the site of many Dena'ina Athabascan Indian villages, and when Russian Orthodox missionaries arrived in the area, in around 1830, the two communities slowly integrated. Before the missionaries arrived, it was customary for the tribe to cremate their dead, but when the cultures started to blend, they began burying their deceased in the cemetery built up around St. Nicholas Church, and the spirit houses were built as part of the Athabascan tradition to provide a place for the deceased soul to dwell during the 40 days it's believed to linger in this world, and the spirit houses were painted in the colours that represent the family. The final touch seen on some of the spirit houses is the Orthodox Christianity symbol of a wooden 3-bar cross, a sign of the culture integration. Although we couldn't find any reports of hauntings at the cemetery, it does look like an eerie place with all those brightly coloured dollhouses for the dead. So that's it for this episode of Too Close to Home. We hope you've enjoyed, and we'd like to say a massive thank you to Jessica, Anthony, Stone, Peter and Krystal, as well as all of the supporters over on Patreon. You really do allow us to keep up what we do. If you'd like to be featured in Too Close to Home, head over to Patreon for more information. Thanks for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next video.